Well, I'm joined now by our environment correspondent, Navin Singh Khadka, who is at the summit in Glasgow. Navin, there's a bit of a sort of audit going on of the first week of COP26. The protesters, the young ones outside, are saying it's still blah, blah, blah. How would you call it after week one?
So as you said just now, it's divided into two camps now. If you listen to those who made the announcements, they believe that it's really good, great going, we've made solid announcements and now there'll be results. But if you listen to critics, including those youth campaigners or protesters, then what they say is these are just, somebody called it a blitz of announcements because they mean nothing. So that's why it remains to be seen. Now, these are a bit like, it's complicated. You have the UN system of negotiation. How will these announcements blend with those negotiations? That is what we need to watch now.
Well, one question for people watching from the outside, Navin, is to what extent the promises made are binding? It's all very well governments committing to 2050 targets of net zero, or in India's case, 2070, but it's so far in the future. Are these in any sense binding?
You're right. So, the striking example they are using in this is Indonesia that committed first, for deforestation to end deforestation, and just days after, they kind of backtracked. So there are concerns that, what are these commitments? Will they live up to it? Particularly, so many commitments in the past have been made, but hardly many of them have been lived up to. So that question still remains valid. Will they be implemented? It's not binding as such.
And there is, of course, the question of the absentees, and we could talk about the absence of the Chinese president, the Brazilian president, Vladimir Putin of Russia. To what extent has that, do you think, damaged the credibility of this summit?
Well, there are questions because, these names that you mentioned, China, the top polluter, Russia also a major polluter, major emitter. So there are questions like what happens if their leaders are not there? And also the fact that there is this energy crisis. So there are some analysts who believe that this could be also one of the reasons because, they'll have to juggle meeting their domestic demand, but also, simultaneously deal with the international forum. That is definitely a huge concern. The crisis, the energy crisis is also a huge concern here.
And a final thought, Navin, looking toward next week, because of course this summit is far from over. The people outside will want, that is the young protesters, will want to be sure that when it ends, there will be new momentum behind the commitments to decarbonize the world by 2050, but really meaningfully halve emissions by 2030. Are we going to get those agreements in your view?
Well, as a matter of fact, the UN's latest figures show we're still actually, whatever has been submitted, it will be around 14% rise in emissions. And that's why COP26 President Alok Sharma has already warned that there might be concerns rising up now with even after all those announcements. How will it go with that text? That's the language they use, the text, in negotiations under the UNFCCC system. So that is a major concern even for the president, and that remains to be seen what happens next week when the real negotiations start.
Right, lots more to come. Navin, thanks for giving us the